Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. And we got our brand new desk here. Yesterday, I had our buddy Eddie way over here. For some reason, I thought that was the right place to put it. I couldn't even reach it with my arms. I decided today that maybe a little closer in might be the best overall way to kind of show him off here today. But nonetheless, no matter where Eddie is, we're glad you're here. A lot of recruiting on today's show. Early signing period obviously begins on Wednesday. We'll do our part to cover all of that, Jeff Sentell included. He is going to be at a rainy, I don't know what the stadium's called. Is it Georgia State Stadium? Is that the name of the stadium now? The one that's hosting the state championships here this weekend? Not indoors, the Falcons' home. It's the Georgia State home there as well, and it is expected to rain some, although a bunch of state championship games this weekend. So we'll talk about a lot of recruiting stuff with Jeff Sentell. I'll start off with some news and nuggets and some notes on that myself. Lou Groza Award has been given out to Rodrigo Blankenship. We'll celebrate on his behalf for that. And just generally speaking, try to have a really good time here on this Friday. Glad to have you with us as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We are just a few days ahead out from the start of the early signing period, heading towards that final weekend. Georgia hosting a bunch of official visitors and taking some flurries of in-home visits here this week with Smart himself, a lot of the assistant coaches out and about, and it's probably still too early to know how much of this work's going to reap big benefits for Georgia, big commitments for the Dogs. But at least thus far, the early returns kind of feel the way they're supposed to be. What fans want is to sort of see their team, see their coaches in the mix for big guys here late in the process, and see Georgia, or whoever your favorite team happens to be, doing everything it can to secure some big elite 4- and 5-star names down to the wire, to believe you have an opportunity to go out there and really change the fortunes of your program with a signing day. And thus far, this week before the early period begins next week, for Georgia kind of feels the way that it's supposed to feel. We'll talk to Jeff Sentell about a lot of this coming up. Let me give you some of it now, though. Obviously, one of the biggest names that's out there, and as Jeff Sentell has tried to explain to us a number of times, and we'll discuss this with Jeff here in a moment, maybe one of the more difficult names to predict is the 5-star defensive lineman Jordan Burch out of Columbia, South Carolina. Obviously, there's the pull from the hometown school. There's some thought that, well, maybe Burch might consider Clemson. LSU and Alabama have tried to get involved in this, maybe LSU especially. Georgia doing what it can here, too, though. They've hosted Burch on a number of visits, and yesterday apparently spent a good bit of time in Columbia, South Carolina on that. One of the news sources there from around Columbia captured a picture of Kirby Smart there in Columbia. This comes from Morning News Sports, saying that Georgia football coach Kirby Smart here at Florence Christian, apparently to watch Jordan Burch play basketball for Hammond. And there's all kinds of rumblings, but other kinds of visits going on there, including seeing Burch play basketball. So Kirby doing his part, Georgia doing its part to try to get out there and make a big final impression on Jordan Burch. You love to see that. Another name that's kind of become to sort of mean a lot more to us here lately, Jeff Sentell talking about this on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger on Wednesday. Recent decommit from LSU. I mentioned him as a part of our SEC through. That's Major Burns. Georgia going in home with him here this week, too. Burns saying on Twitter that the home visit with Georgia went great. He's obviously kind of out on that open market again, and it looks like Georgia's kind of doing everything it can to make a big impact on him. The other name you hear in that safety conversation, lots Eric Reed, the former Ole Miss commit. So a lot of these guys that Georgia seems to be looking at safety right now are kind of new to the party type names, late in on, maybe for various reasons, but certainly trying to make up a lot of ground fast. And maybe Major Burns is an example of that. But it's not just in-home visits for Georgia here this week. I guess there's also the thought about the big final weekend for official visits for Georgia. One of the things that's gotten a lot of attention over the last 48 hours, the fact that Tate Ratledge is going to be on hand. You may have seen the helicopter landing at the Darlington School back in Rome a little earlier this week. Ratledge, one of those big names in terms of who's going to be on hand for the official visit. We know how important that pitch is from Georgia for him, especially for new offensive line coach Matt Luke. So we'll obviously be watching that very carefully as far as the official visit stuff goes down this weekend. And when Jeff joins us here in a moment, you better believe that's one of the things we'll be talking about with Jeff. Is this one of those opportunities for Georgia to make a strong enough pitch that Ratledge still signs with him in December? Is this one of those deals where one way or another this may get held off until February? Who's the chief competition for Tate Ratledge? We'll kind of talk about all that with Jeff Sentell here coming up in a moment. But Ratledge himself is not the only really key visitor for Georgia this weekend. There are potentially a number of those, Ratledge included. Another one of those guys is Dante Manning, the big-time four-star defensive back out of Kansas City, who also kind of gave a bit of a foreshadowing for his weekend plans when he put it out there on Twitter that he plans on being in Georgia this weekend. And Manning's one of those guys that I've never really thought of as an either-or for Keely Ringo. This is always for me, and obviously, like a lot of Georgia fans, maybe from time to time, I can be a little greedy on this kind of stuff, but this has kind of always, for me, been one of those both-and situations. You want to see Georgia win with the five-star defensive back, Ringo, and you'd love to see a guy like Manning paired with him to go along with Jalen Kimber and whatever Georgia still does at the safety position. This is probably still a position of need late in the process for Georgia if you presume Ringo to be uncommitted. And Manning to go along with that would certainly be a great way for Georgia to answer that need. So Manning among the list of official visitors here for Georgia right now. A lot to think about with all of that. And then there's this flurry of late offers also going out for Georgia. And sometimes it's difficult to know what this kind of stuff means. Sometimes it doesn't quite mean what you think it means. Sometimes you're sort of left to shrug to the whole thing. But at least one of the late offers going out for Georgia certainly got my attention. It's McKinley Jackson, a big four-star defensive lineman from the state of Mississippi. He puts out on Twitter that he's blessed to receive an offer from Georgia. And in the tags here, one of the people that he tags, in addition to the official football account from Georgia, he also tags the offensive line coach, Matt Luke. Obviously, Luke was recruiting Jackson dating back to his time as Ole Miss head coach. And now with Luke at Georgia, suddenly there's a chance for maybe Georgia to kind of get in here and have a relationship with a guy like Jackson, who is, if you look at the recruiting rankings on this, a pretty respected prospect all the way around. Now, this is very, very late for Georgia to get him for a guy like this, and my understanding is there are a lot of other SEC schools who've spent a lot of time working with him and establishing that long-standing relationship. Kirby Smart's explained to us before that when it comes to those big guys, line of scrimmage guys, offensive and defensive linemen, that the way to win with them are over the course of like 24 months worth of recruiting, in some cases 36 months. Worth of recruiting. That's how you win with those guys. Georgia doesn't quite have that established with McKinley Jackson, but presumably would not be extending an offer if they didn't think there was a chance. And apparently the person that Jackson tags is the reason why Georgia thinks it has a chance. Matt Luke potentially helping Georgia on the defensive line as well as the offensive line. So fun stuff right now. And a lot of this stuff is going to break Georgia's way. Some of these are maybe a little bit easier to predict than others. A couple of these names we kick around right now or have kicked around over the course of the last couple of weeks, maybe they don't quite break Georgia's way. But as I said off the top of the program, all you can ask from your team in a situation like this is just be in the mix. Show me that you're working. Show me that you're trying to, what's the old boxing analogy, kind of flurry to finish the round. Georgia's clearly trying to get its punches in here as this round gets ready to close out. And I, for one, could not be more excited about the early signing period beginning on Wednesday. I can't wait to talk to Jeff Sentell about it in a moment. Can't wait to see how it all plays out then. In one way or another, some more elite names certainly seem bound and likely to end up as a part of the Bulldogs 2020 class. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger. We're proud to be in kind of the next phase of our brand new studio. If you're just tuning in for the first time today, you missed us yesterday. Check out this brand new desk. How sharp does this look? We appreciate everybody that made this possible, and certainly the folks at Kroger for making it all possible here on the air today. And, of course, there's a lot of ways you can get in touch with us. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Radio Noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. As a podcast, wherever you find them, Apple Podcast Player, the Google Podcast Player, the world-famous DawgNation.com. One of the fun things about checking out the show when we post it at DawgNation.com is A lot of the stories that I reference or topics that I reference, sometimes I give you more details about that when we post the show there, links to the source material and things along those lines. If you're a regular podcast viewer, you're familiar with the idea, or I should say podcast listener, you're familiar with the notion of show notes. Our show notes are really the show when it's posted at DawgNation.com every single day. So get more of DawgNation Daily when you check out the podcast and the show post for the podcast at DawgNation.com each and every day. And by the way, speaking of our friends at Kroger, right now, and let me see if I can get this one out the right way, at Kroger, you can celebrate a a lot of savings. That's right, 12 days of merry with our friends at Kroger. Nobody loves the holiday season more than Kroger. Nobody does more to help you get ready for it than our friends at Kroger, including right now. You can opt in to start saving. Text the word 12merry. That's 12, Merry as in Merry Christmas, 12merry to 99894, and you can start saving today. 12merry. Text that phrase to 99894 with our friends at Kroger. All right, we'll have more from Jeff Sentell here coming up in a moment on the recruiting scene for the Georgia Bulldogs. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse. Here today, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. I had a chance to see Bob Tharp the other day and his lovely wife, Ashley. Always great to get a chance to hang out with them and see them for a moment. And certainly they're big Georgia fans, disappointed about the SEC championship loss, but also excited about the future and also eager to celebrate some of the good things that still went on for 2019. One of those was kind of last night. You may have watched the ESPN college football season-ending award ceremony. Rodrigo Blankenship, the Georgia kicker, won the Groza Award. I thought this was really fun and good for Georgia for a couple of reasons. The first thing being Blankenship is really going to end his Georgia career as one of the most popular players this program has ever had. And to see a guy who gets the huge ovations, you know, at one point in time, I'm talking about even going back to his freshman year, I sort of dressed up as Rodrigo Blankenship for one of the Kroger events we did back in 2016. That just kind of gives you an idea of how popular Blankenship was even back then. He's just kind of always been this recognizable figure, always been this fan favorite. And to see him now honored not just by Georgia fans, but by college football folks around the country, I think that's just a really fun thing, a really good thing all the way around. And I also think it's a good thing, too, because I think for Georgia, this establishes some real credentials. This is now 3 years in a row that Georgia has added a national award winner, best player at a position to end the season. And in 2017, it was Roquan Smith for the Butkus Award. Last season, that streak continued. DeAndre Baker won the Thorpe Award. And Luke Groza Award, winning Rodrigo Blankenship, adding to that string of victories for Georgia when it comes to these national awards. I think that's something that Georgia ought to be celebrating. I think that's something that Georgia will be celebrating. You know, I'm lucky enough that I get a chance to be in the Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall a decent amount. I don't cover the team from Athens every single day, so I'm not always there, but I'm there enough. And by the way, the building itself is open to the public from time to time, so you know you can kind of go in there and take a tour and see some of this yourself. But you know, I get a chance to see all those trophies collected in the building. And those trophies, you know, those national awards, that kind of stuff, the things that Pollock has won, the things that Roquan has won, Herschel's Heisman Trophy, everything else, those really go a long way towards telling the story of a program. And Rodrigo Blankenship is now part of that story. Rodrigo Blankenship has added to that story, added to that legacy. And I think that's a really cool thing to see. You want to be able to walk in, show off a building like that, and see a lot of hardware. It just helps with future recruiting at all positions, not just kickers, but all positions. It just looks good to see national awards. It looks good to be relevant on an ESPN show like this at the end of the season. Georgia is, thanks to Rodrigo Blankenship last night. It's kind of a cool thing. Blankenship also had a couple cool things to say on the heels of winning the award, looking back on his time at Georgia and the path he traveled to get to the end of his career, one honored for its success. Here's a little bit of Blankenship on that.
It's been amazing. I couldn't have asked for anything better. Just going to the University of Georgia, one of the best programs in the country, walking on and, you know, just having to go to work every single day and then having a coaching staff turnover is never the best situation. But, you know, you play with the cards you're dealt. And I was just going to work every day and just establishing a great relationship with Coach Smart and all the new players that we had coming in, just being able to work your way up and then having Coach Smart give me a scholarship, and it was one of the most amazing blessings in my life. And then having so many amazing people behind me, my parents, my amazing girlfriend, just supporting me every single step of the way and always showing me how to bounce back and persevere. It's been an amazing journey.
We have gotten used to Rodrigo's story, so it's kind of become old hat to us. But the degree to which that Rodrigo persevered to become the starting kicker at Georgia, then earn that scholarship, and then lead Georgia to some really big wins. Go back and look at some of those that he contributed to in 2016. The Kentucky game comes to mind. Game-winning field goal against Notre Dame in 2017, that comes to mind. Obviously, what happened in the Rose Bowl where he gave Georgia a chance to win that game in the second half because of the way that he closed out the first half. It's really a pretty amazing story of how Rodrigo has persevered. We have kind of gotten used to it, so we don't probably reflect back on it as much as we should, but it's good to hear Rodrigo be able to tell that story last night. Something else that Blankenship also said is, in addition to the story of him becoming a very good kicker, one of the best in recent SEC history, also the time at Georgia and his enjoyment of not just the football program, but the school over the last 5 years. This is a pretty good commercial for UGA as well, and with a kind of a funny note to Chris Fowler at the end. From ESPN's broadcast last night, here's more of Rodrigo Blankenship.
I don't think you ever come in and expect to be somewhere for 5 years, but, you just have to, it just takes what it takes to, to go all the way through. I've been so fortunate to earn my undergrad degree at the University of Georgia and now working on a master's. And, hopefully when my playing career is over, I can join you one day.
Hey, I would aim higher, but if that's where you end up, I'm sure you do fantastic. This is why we love covering this sport. Congratulations, Rodrigo Blankenship, winner of the Lou Groza Award.
So good stuff there from Rodrigo Blankenship. Funny with Chris Fowler there at the end. Rodrigo does want to be a broadcaster when his career is done, and obviously he'll be a very good one if that's what he sets his mind to. I'm sure he'll have some NFL years probably before you get to that point, but funny to hear that exchange with he and Chris Fowler last night, and congratulations to Georgia kicker Rodrigo Blankenship on being the nation's best and being the Lou Groza Award winner here for this year. It's Around the Doghouse, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and divorce is always a really tough thing to talk about, but I can't tell you this enough. If you find yourself potentially going through that scenario, you want to have somebody on your side. You want to educate yourself in the process. And the great thing is our friends at Merriweather and Tharp can help you do that even before you choose to make them your advocate. They offer thousands of free web pages, podcasts, all kinds of free resources to help you navigate the divorce process and help make the decision about why Merriweather and Tharp is the team of attorneys you want to have on your side to go through this. So they are your source for Georgia divorce. That's why you want to find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. Website to go to is theatlantadivorceteam.com. That'll get you in touch with my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. And if you find yourself in a tough situation, you need an advocate. The expertise that Merriweather and Tharp has earned over handling cases like this thousands of times, they can put to work for you. But you've got to find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. All right, it's DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We'll have more on Georgia later on, the team on the field, some interesting stuff coming up from Georgia wide receiver Lawrence Cager. But for now, here on our program, let's talk some more recruiting and welcome in Jeff Sentell. And we'll get Jeff here coming up in just a moment. We'll obviously take a lot of your comments today as part of the R.S. Andrews cooldown as well. And, while we're waiting to get Jeff kind of up and rolling and going here, I will say to you, kind of what I said off the top of the program. Honestly, I don't know how many of these big names that are still out there Georgia's going to win with, right? I don't know. I mean, some of them probably yes, some of them probably no. Maybe the yeses are, some of the yeses anyway, are maybe fairly easy to predict. Maybe a couple of the no's are also fairly easy to predict here, or at least the more likely no's also easy to predict. But you can't ask for much more than have your team be in the mix. You can't ask for much more than have your team kind of be in that discussion here late in the process, and that's where Georgia finds itself, and I think that's a really fun thing. With more on that, looks like we had Jeff Sentell up and running and ready to go, so we'll welcome him into DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, and of course it's great to have you with us as well.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Jeff Sentell joins us live here on this Friday morning from downtown Atlanta. Big string of state championship playoff games to take place there at Georgia State Stadium, the old side of the Braves ballpark, where weather's not expected to be great today, but the football is expected to be quite good when it is playing and able to be played. So I guess, Jeff, let me start there for a moment before we get into the specific recruiting lines for Georgia. How is the weather, and what is the anticipation for these state championship games here in our home state today?
Well, Brandon, it's going to feel a lot like, to me, like a few games up at Stanford Stadium this year.
I was thinking the same thing.
You got some precipitation. Let me do my best David Chandler or Glenn Burns here. It is a 40-degree type temperature. You've got a misting rain. It's just enough to bother you and chill you, and make sure that you bought some or your wife or significant others got you some Gore-Tex gear last Christmas. Right now, at the end of the first quarter, Wesleyan, that's the Ric Flair woo, 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 woo squad,
Yeah.
is leading Eagles Landing Christian Academy 3-0.
And did I see this, that Eagles Landing also has their own professional wrestling supporter? Didn't Kurt Angle do a video in support of Eagles Landing? And if so, what is Angle's connection to that school? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, I think it's a family member, but I think also it's just a relationship coming up from that area, knowing folks from that area. The Chargers, everybody calls them Elka, but it's Eagles Landing Christian. Of course, Georgia commitment, Justin Robinson is there. He's playing both offense and defense for the Chargers right now. He started both ways for the Chargers last year on their state championship team at receiver and cornerback. Also interesting that Justin Robinson, I know we've talked about Carson Beck going to be able to do this. Justin Robinson is also expected to be in Athens next week for bowl practices leading up to the Sugar Bowl.
Well, that's certainly good news. A great chance to get acclimated into the program, be a part of some of those practice drills, if nothing else, and just I think there's a lot of osmosis learning that goes on in a situation like that, being around other good players, best collection of talent any of these guys will ever stood on the same field with at any one time. Go ahead and begin that learning process. I think that's invaluable. Jeff, let me kind of transition here as a part of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger and get into some of the key recruiting storylines that are out there right now. I want to be respectful of your time, given the fact you're trying to follow some football games. Jeff, I'll begin with Jordan Burch. I thought it was fun to see the Georgia folks, Kirby Smart included, in Columbia so much yesterday, getting a chance to really spend some time with him. Obviously, there's no guarantee this works out to the tune of a commitment. The Kirby Copter's not undefeated, but it does plenty of times. And in Columbia yesterday, given the fact that Burch has also been in Athens plenty, kind of a nice way for Georgia to put the punctuation mark on its recruiting pitch for Burch. Don't know how this one ends, but you certainly can't say that Georgia hasn't gone 100% in its pursuit of this big five-star defensive lineman.
Yeah, what do we talk about a lot, Brandon, following the visit? If Mr. Burch makes his way to Athens this weekend for his official, as he should, it's going to be a lot of trips to Clark County in the 706 area code for Mr. Burch and his family. I think the number will grow to 6, I believe, so far in this calendar year. Burt's just an amazing player. I think he's one of those that has Trayvon Walker-type ability. I just don't know if he'll be able to make a Trayvon Walker-type impact in college football, at least during his freshman season. Skilled athlete. He plays in a South Carolina independent schools league, which I would equate maybe to public school GHSA Class Single A. You've got a lot to think about there with Burch. LSU was supposed to get a chance to see him sometime today. Clemson went in this week as well. Georgia. It's funny, Brandon. I know everybody gets down and dirty in the DawgNation forum right now and kind of wallers around in all the threads. Well, one of the most popular threads this week has been the one about the flight tracker, where people are putting up planes, and it's kind of funny how in like the hurry up thread, which is the one I drop stuff into from time to time. I'm saying I'm hearing this about this guy, look for this guy, and then all of a sudden there's a flight plan picked out for one of the planes leaving Athens to go to one of those locales.
Yeah.
And then you hear that boots are on the ground, and then you see like Instagram or social media pictures with coaches and prospects kind of confirming the visit a little bit. It's a little bit like for the DawgNation.com forum connoisseur, gives them a chance to act like they're living out their own episode of True Detective a little bit with CSI DawgNation on the trail during the week leading up to the early signing period.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to describe that all the way around. And speaking of boots on the ground, Georgia also had some of those with Major Burns, a guy that we talked about him before the Hedges, presented by Kroger on Wednesday, kind of newly on the market after decommitting from LSU. Georgia needs safeties. Burns looks like a pretty good one. And tell me what you think this means here this late in the process, Georgia getting a chance to spend some time with Major.
Yeah, well, I guess it speaks first off to wondering about how many guys are going to go to the NFL, how many guys are going to come back for their senior season. I think that's trying to make sure they've got all the bases covered. Remember, Georgia only signed one true safety in its class last year. DJ Daniel and Tyreek Stevenson are both cornerbacks, and DJ Daniel only has one other year of eligibility left beyond his first year as a junior college transfer. So right away, you see only at the most 2 more years of scholarship time for 2 to 3 of scholarship time for Lewis Seen and then Tyreek Stevenson. So then you got to go, how hard is Georgia going to go in the paint, so to speak, in the DB class? I think Major Burns is an example of that guy who seems to me like LSU just its cup runneth over a little bit with high quality, upgradable slots in their recruiting class. They want to hold on to all those defensive lineman commits they got. I think they got 8 or 9 of those, and they only have 1 offensive line recruit at this time. So a player like Major Burns from Baton Rouge, the number 12 safety in the country, I like him a lot, Brandon, in that mold of could be a cornerback, could be a safety. Same way I feel about Eric Reed Jr., who will be in town this weekend on an official visit. Georgia's just trying to make sure that defensive backs position. Remember, in some years, Kirby Smart has signed 6, 7 defensive backs in a class. I think Georgia's going to have to address that a little bit. Maybe 1 less extra offensive line slot in this class, maybe not. 2 quick developments I want to alert everybody to, I think, to me, which felt like a foregone conclusion shortly after Sam Pittman to Arkansas. Joshua Braun, there was a message across social media pointing that he was now a proud Florida Gator. He is now in that fold, going to go through bowl practices. See, those things right there are very vital to young players looking to get a head start. Going to go through bowl practices with Florida. You also see some interesting I guess, development. I want to point to the 3-star offensive tackle Devin Willock out of New Jersey from Paramus Catholic. Funny how the recruiting world works, Brandon. On December the 9th, Devin Willock tweeted out a graphic from Penn State that said he was going to go home. He was going in on his official visit. Last night, he tweeted out he is decommitted from Penn State, was no longer going to go to Penn State. That's the 3-star offensive tackle, about 6'6", and some change, about 340 on the scale right there. Great size, length, like Georgia a lot. He told me this week, folks, that he still considers Georgia a dream school option for him and that Georgia was for sure still in it. Now, if you've read the forum over the last 12 hours, I'm projecting him to also be an official visitor this weekend down in Athens as well. So see one offensive lineman moving on and potentially another one coming into the fold.
I want to get more on these official visits with you coming up here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Hold tight for me just for a second, though, because I know you're at the old Brave Stadium today, but at the current Brave Stadium, there's something really fun going on this weekend. And I want to make sure everybody's aware of it. The Atlanta Braves and the U.S. Ski and Snowboard are teaming up to host the Visa Big Air presented by Land Rover at SunTrust Park. That's today and actually it's December 20th and 21st. It's Friday, December 20th and Saturday, December 21st. This is going to be an amazing event, kind of the first of its kind to ever come to Atlanta, a snowboard and free ski type event. I'm talking about a 15-story steel scaffold being built up, kind of creating a mountain experience right there in SunTrust Park. 800 tons of snow are going to fill that up. You're going to have guys and gals jumping on this thing at up to 40 miles an hour, doing tricks in the air. They're going to be 70 feet in the air. This is going to be an amazing thing to see Friday, December 20th, Saturday, December 21st at SunTrust Park. It is the most unique holiday activity this December. You can get a 2-day discounted pass there as well. So a couple different ways for you to find out more about this. Go to Braves.com for more information, Braves.com for more information, or you can check out DawgNation.com and see more about the big Visa Air event coming to SunTrust Park. And, of course, if you're watching on video, you kind of see a rendering of what that big mountain's going to look like in SunTrust Park. This is crazy. I'm always for anytime you kind of repurpose some of these ballparks and do something different with them. Some cases it's a bowl game. Some cases, in this case, it's like skiing and snowboarding. I'm always kind of fascinated to see, what you can do instead of a ballpark. It's actually going to be a really great event. So go to Braves.com or DawgNation.com and find out more about the big event coming to SunTrust Park a little bit later on. Jeff, also big doings at Georgia this weekend. You mentioned former Penn State commit taking a visit here, Georgia getting involved with another offensive lineman. We talked before you joined us about Dante Manning's plans on being there this weekend. Obviously, Tate Ratledge is one of those high-profile official visitors. If you don't mind, just give us a quick thumbnail of kind of what can happen this weekend, Georgia's best-case scenario for the dudes it's bringing in, and what it is they're going to try to sell while they're on campus.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to speak in Brandon terms, like maybe a lot of us do with our wives whenever there's any car repair bills or our wives come in with any car repair bills. I'm going to start from the top. 5-star Keely Ringo, the official visitor, is supposed to be in town, nation's #1 corner. going to make another trip to Georgia. You saw the in-home visits. You saw how he's posted pictures of Oregon and Texas, but no pictures from an in-home visit from Georgia this week. He's got his official visit coming this weekend. Jordan Birch, we mentioned him earlier. That's another five-star hopeful that we should look to see in Athens this weekend. If he's not in Athens this weekend, it's going to make folks scratch their head a little bit about Georgia's chances there with South Carolina or LSU. I think those are the two schools in it late with Jordan Birch. Keep going down the list. Dante Manning, he's now moved up to the nation's number 6 overall cornerback on the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's taken official visits in the past to Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arizona State, and Oregon. His last official visit is to Georgia. Kirby Smart has told him that he compares him to a Jalen Ramsey type. You look at Dante Manning, he checks a lot of boxes, track guy, special teams standout, track speed, 10.7, 10.67 in the 100, makes plays on special teams, could play all over the secondary for Georgia. He's also expected to be in town. You keep going down the list. You've got Tate Ratledge in town. You've got Eric Reed Jr. in town. You've got Devin Willock in town. You noticed on the forum, Georgia sent out some offers late this week, early this week, to a couple of in-state receivers. One of those is Sam Brown out of Savannah, working to make sure he's going to be in town on an official visit this weekend. One thing we did learn is that Gentavious Hollywood Robertson, the athlete out of Jones County, told me, even though he got an in-home visit from Todd Hartley and Cortez Hankton this week, even though he picked up a late in the game 11th hour offer, he's going to be at Duke this weekend on an official visit.
Okay.
Just drawing our own conclusions there, it seems to me like Georgia's late offer is not going to be enough to sway him to get him in the mix for him to give Georgia a good late look. Gentavious Robertson was a 3-star wide receiver, offered as a receiver. Robertson also told me last night that he's going to sign during the official period. So that really closes the window in terms of Georgia coming in late down their board to get that young man in state. So, I'm sure that, you're going to see all these. We're going to have a full detailed list as soon as I dry off and get through watching Justin Robinson play on site. Eric Reed, I want to reiterate, is a pretty big official visitor this weekend. So, again, another defensive back type target there. And the one thing, and this will come up in our coverage early next week, is a lot of people are looking for the big booms on National Signing Day, the first period of the early signing day. I'm going to couch folks' thoughts right here, not with some raindrops or not with some cloudy skies, but the fact that there will be some delayed booms if they do happen for the Georgia program this year. Jordan Birch is expected to make his announcement on December 19th, not the 18th, which is the first day of the period. Also, Dante Manning, a gentleman we just mentioned, he's going to make his announcement at the Under Armour All-American game. Same seems very likely for Darnell Washington. I think it would be considered a surprise now if he goes ahead and does it next week during the early signing period. Keely Ringo, January the 4th, that's when he would announce his decision as well. So I think this might be one of the things where we're in college, we're getting our exams. We might not know for a couple weeks what the final early look from early signing day will look like for the Georgia Bulldogs. That Wednesday, that first day, might simply mean confirmation, hopeful confirmation, at least for DawgNation's thought process there on whether they get a guy like Tate Ratledge to sign early, whether they get a guy like Chad Lindbergh to sign early. Cedric Von Prawn and Broderick Jones, as we reported earlier in the week, those guys are not likely to sign during the early period. So this one is not going to come together all neatly, and Georgia's going to know definitely number 2, number 3 class after the first day of the signing period, flurries of activity on Wednesday.
Let me squeeze in one final question before you go, Jeff. I mentioned the name McKinley Jackson before you joined us, defensive lineman out of Mississippi. Looks like he's gotten a Georgia offer as of late, and looks like he's got a pretty nice relationship with Georgia's new offensive line coach, Matt Luke. Is it too late to get in the process on a player like this? Because if you look at the 24/7 Sports Composite, he's like knocking on the door of being a top 100 player. I think he's 113th overall in the 24/7 Sports Composite. That sounds pretty good to me, but is it too late to get involved here?
Definitely not. He's a top 12 defensive tackle, Brandon. In some ways, this young man's flight pattern in terms of when he's going to land his decision on the runway, so to speak, is going to work out a little bit for Georgia to get cozy if there's the opportunity to do so. Jackson is not going to make his decision during the early signing period. He's going to be an old-school February guy. So that would leave him a lot of time in January to get cozy and really consider Georgia. He's the nation's number 12 defensive tackle. He was out at the opening and the opening finals out in Texas this summer. I got to look at him. He's a big body type, 6'1.5", about 330 or so. I remember watching him work a lot compared to some of the guys like Nazir Stackhouse and Jamil Burrows, and I think Mr. Jackson held himself quite well and held up quite well working against the elite offensive linemen in the country out in Texas at the opening at Dallas Cowboys headquarters back in July.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Jeff. Thanks for being in Atlanta for us today. Keep your eyes on these guys, Justin Robinson included. Of course, we send out tremendous well wishes for him to have a successful conclusion to his high school career here today, and looking forward to watching a lot of these games this weekend, certainly following them, if nothing else. So, Jeff, we appreciate you doing that for us. Thanks for keeping your ear to the ground for what's going to be happening in Athens this weekend and everywhere else where recruiting will be taking place. Appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, and I'll look forward to speaking to you again soon.
And one thing to keep up with, once you get off your DawgNation Daily stream tonight, today, this morning, or you can also cross-screen watch a little bit these Georgia High School Association State Football Championships. There will be 4 today. There will be 4 on Saturday, and they will all be on GPB Sports, Georgia Public Broadcasting. That organization does a fantastic job covering high school football in the state of Georgia.
All right, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, good stuff there from Jeff Sentell. Good to have him as a part of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. And I kind of want to transition here and talk about a couple of SEC stories for a second as we go cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And I think there's going to be a real theme to a couple of these stories. And I think it is going to be Georgia-related. And I think for the most part you'll agree with what I'm about to say. Before that, though, let me remind you about my friends at Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, turning 50 years bold this year and redefining what cruise vacations are all about. And one of the ways in which they do that, Perfect Day Coco Cay. This is a private getaway in the Bahamas exclusive to our friends at Royal Caribbean. There's part of the island that's completely filled with like really fun things like slides and kind of adventure type stuff. And there's another part of the island that's like totally about relaxing and just being calm and just really enjoying everything that paradise has to offer. And really, for my family, there'd be something for everybody because obviously my kids and really my wife too probably would want to be enjoying all like the really, really fun stuff. And honestly, for me, when I watch the video that we show and there's like the cabana like right there in the water, you give me a tropical drink in that cabana, that's about all I would need to really have a true perfect day Coco Cay type experience. So whatever side you kind of sort of gear yourself more towards, Perfect Day Coco Cay's got something for you. And the cool thing is, a lot of the ships that sail there go right out of Port Canaveral, which is right next to the Orlando. So if you kind of live here in the Atlanta area where I do, it's very easy to get to. RoyalCaribbean.com to find out more about that, including how you can get in touch with a travel advisor to book your vacation. That's RoyalCaribbean.com. So I think that we're entering into kind of an interesting new era in the SEC, where I sort of think fun is going to be brought back into this league again. Let me give you a couple of examples of that. Lane Kiffin, I believe, is bringing fun back to the SEC there at his job at Ole Miss. He's seemingly going to go poking the bear at Alabama. He's offering Scott Cochran, the Alabama strength and conditioning coach, an on-field coaching role as a way of trying to steal him from the Crimson Tide. He's going to be going after lots of assistants there, really trying to be a thorn in Nick Saban's side. There was also the tweet that Kiffin had recently. I don't have this to show to you, but apparently he was inside the Mississippi State football complex. He was sort of tweeting out a picture of like a hail steak thing that sort of made it seem like he was in Starkville. It was kind of a weird tweet. I didn't really understand it, to be honest with you. But Ole Miss fans were just loving it, and Mississippi State fans were like firing back. I'm not even really quite sure what it meant, what the genesis of all that was, but it is obviously fun because you can see the reaction that people are having to it. Kiffin knows how to cultivate attention. I think that's a good thing to have in the league. To be completely honest with you, the super serious way of doing football just doesn't quite work, seemingly, as well as some of the super serious guys seem to think is going to, Georgia's coach included. And I'm not taking a shot here at Kirby Smart, nor am I complaining about the way that he goes about his business. But Smart is like lethally serious about everything involved with football, it would seem like, 99% of the time. And, what has that really gotten him? I mean, it's gotten Georgia to a pretty good spot, but ask the average Georgia fan, did you enjoy the 2019 season? I think the average Georgia fan would say, No, not as much as maybe I thought I was going to. And ultimately what we're left with here is a scenario where none of us can control the outcomes of any of this. We can't control the games that Georgia wins. Those are largely not in anyone's full total control. We also can't control the recruits that choose to come to Georgia and the recruits that can't. The one thing I think we can kind of choose, though, is what our default position is in terms of how much we enjoy these seasons as they take place. I think what Lane Kiffin's going to do at Ole Miss, even though it'd be described as some as antics, I think it's a reminder that there's a way to do college football and have it be fun. There's a way to do college football and have it lean towards entertainment. There's a certain militaristic style that a lot of these sort of former Saban assistants have, and I'm not even quite sure that's working for Saban quite so well anymore. By contrast, guys like Ed Orgeron, more on him in a moment, Dabo Swinney, certainly the reigning national champion, the sort of guys who've tapped into a little bit more of a fun vein, I think they're drawing a pretty nice contrast to a guy like Saban in Alabama, and I think a lot of the former Saban assistants who kind of follow in his footsteps in terms of their demeanor. How's that working out for you right now? I think that's a pretty fair question to ask, and I think that Lane Kiffin is a pretty good example of that. More on that in a moment, by the way. Let me also squeeze in this. You heard Jeff Sentell say that Joshua Braun, the former UGA committee of the offensive line, has chosen Florida. Florida was kind of always in on his recruitment. Certainly the way that you read the statement that Braun had when he decommitted, as Jeff took it down from DawgNation.com, hearing from Braun on this subject. Seems like he may have been bothered by Sam Pittman leaving. I think you shrug your shoulders on this. What's Pittman supposed to do? Not take the Arkansas head coaching job? I hate that Braun was disappointed about that. I don't have ill will for him going to Florida. I wish him well, even though obviously we have a good time being Gator haters around here. I'm not going to say a bad word about Braun. He made the choice that was best for him, and now Georgia's going to work really hard to fill that scholarship with another big-time player. By the way, one more quick sort of like fun-themed story for a moment. So Joe Burrow tells this story of he's meeting with Ed Orgeron. They're going to have like a recruiting dinner. Orgeron's going to kind of make his pitch to him. And they go to this restaurant, and there's no crawfish on the menu. That's what Orgeron finds out. So he has like the waiter go to the back. They get like a manager or something. He comes out. Orgeron gives him some money, sends him to like a seafood market to buy a bunch of crawfish. He brings them back, cooks them up, and then bring them out for he and Joe Burrow. Now, this is one of those stories that I hope is true because of how good it is, and I'm obviously no LSU fan and not necessarily that big of an Orgeron fan. But this is kind of one of those stories you sort of want to be true. It's another example of college football does not have to be like this drudgery. You can kind of go about your business with a little bit of personality, a little bit of enjoyment. I think it's one of the things that attracted Arkansas to Sam Pittman eventually is the fact that, hey, this is a guy that's having a good time in life. And, now that Sam Pittman's gone, I think that Georgia's going to try to figure that out. Like, who's going to be our Pittman? Who's going to be the guy that's sort of enjoying the process? Not just trusting the process, but actually enjoying the process with the shakers and the yes, sir, some version of that. Who's going to be our guy sending out for crawfish when we take a transfer quarterback out to a dinner? I think those are important questions to ask, and I think that one of the things that sort of is a part of the LSU success equation right now is the fact that Orgeron's just kind of comfortable being himself. He joked about this before the SEC championship game. He's about to be in 18 to 22 homes over the course of the final week for recruiting. That means 18 to 22 gumbos, he said. It's kind of a funny laugh line. It was kind of clearly planned on Orgeron's part, but he's as the pro wrestling fan will understand, he's kind of living his gimmick right now, and I don't think that's such a bad thing necessarily. We'll make that cruiser on the SEC courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. I want to give you a chance to hear from Lawrence Cager in a moment. Important topic on the Georgia offense. We'll get to that. Before that, though, here, let me also let you hear from my friends at the ANGTBC for a moment. A really important organization for you to be aware of if you are in kind of any kind of the construction type of work, because they're dedicated to making that a better experience for you with work opportunities, better living wages, protecting your benefits, also earn while you learn, tuition, apprentice training. You can earn as much of $100,000 while you're serving your apprenticeship. They offer employer-paid pension and insurance, and they can give you wages up to 30% higher than non-union workers. Not just for men, women encouraged to apply as well. Check them out online at 404. Actually, let me see that one more time, please. The website, angbtc.org. That's angbtc.org, or you can give them a call, 404-584-0005. That's 404-584-0005. Let's talk about the Georgia offense here for a moment. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. I'm going to invite you to go to DawgNation's YouTube page, and you can see this full video for yourself. A really good interview. And I'm not saying I performed it well. I'm saying it was interesting to hear from the subject, Lawrence Cager, on the Georgia offense. Because if it's really true what I was saying a moment ago, hey, you got to make Georgia football fun again. I think that's going to really be one of our themes for 2020. Georgia football is going to be more fun. We just got to find a way as fans just sort of enjoy this more than kind of the funeral dirge that it seemed like most of the 2019 season was. And obviously it'd be a little easier to enjoy all of this if the offense can kind of perform better, if Georgia can kind of find its footing on offense a little bit more. And Kirby Smart said over and over again that the wide receiver position group might be a key to that. So when I had a chance to talk to Lawrence Cager, not playing in the SEC championship game, injured, but there meeting with the reporters after the game, one of the questions I asked Cager, you can see the full interview at DawgNation's YouTube page. You were successful in this offense this year. You were a guy that Jake Fromm had a lot of trust in, and you two flourished together. Why did Georgia have so many issues, though, when you weren't on the field? That was my question to Cager, and here was his answer.
Honestly, I'm not really sure. I wish I could give you an answer, but I'm not sure because I know my guys come in and work every day and work like no other group I've seen. And come down, whether it's, we come to work every day, we put the next day behind us and work even harder than tomorrow. So, like I said, I couldn't tell you. I don't know, what the stats are, but I just know when I see my guys on the field, I know they're giving it their all, and that's all you can ask for as a teammate, a leader, and a coach. So.
Yeah, I don't fault that answer from Cager at all because I think the honest truth is it's a pretty difficult question to answer, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to know. What was the difference in what Cager brought to the table and what other guys brought to the table? You can say, well, Cager's just a good receiver, and that's true, but certainly at the beginning of the season, we wouldn't have necessarily thought that he was going to obviously be way better than most of the other receiving options that Georgia had at its disposal. But somehow, some way, Cager seemed to figure out something this year, or Fromm seemed to be able to figure out something with Cager that he wasn't able to figure out with the other guys. No matter what Georgia does to address this situation in recruiting, deciding the answer to that question, what was the chemistry between Fromm and Cager? How do you establish that with more guys next season once Cager's gone? That's going to be a really important topic for Georgia to address. All right, one more thing before we get ready to go today. It is obviously a big weekend heading for Georgia, going in with a lot of other sports involved right now. Obviously, our attention's on football and what's going to happen for Georgia with recruiting, but between now and then, couple other sporting events I want you to make you aware of, including the men's basketball team tomorrow in Tempe. I believe this is Bobby Hurley's team. Am I right about this? Is Hurley still the coach at Arizona State? The Dogs take on Arizona State in Tempe tomorrow. The Lady Dogs on Sunday against the Paladins of Furman. Gym Dogs will have their kind of G-Day style event, the first look event, taking place on Tuesday. So men's basketball Saturday, Lady Dogs on Sunday, Gym Dogs, kind of an early preview of their season on Tuesday. And then the early signing period for recruiting begins on Wednesday. And, of course, we're all over that. And Kroger actually going to bring a lot of that coverage to you coming up in the days ahead. It's our Kroger Kickoff. It's brought to you by Kroger. And, of course, as we head towards the weekend, we think about Kroger. That's true for the parties or the holiday events we might be doing, but it's also true for the events that Georgia has going on with its athletic programs as well. That's when we do the Kroger Kickoff here every single Friday in our program. And speaking of Kroger, making it easy for you on the weekends and this holiday season, they're offering free pickup at all stores right now as you head towards the holidays. You want to get some of that time back, Kroger doing that for you. You simply place your order on the website. You show up and you pick it up in person, and they're going to have that delivered right out there to you. So really, really good stuff. Free pickup at all stores right now there at Kroger. You can find out more details on that, Kroger.com, Kroger app, and everything else. So check that out as we do the Kroger Kickoff here each and every Friday on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And, of course, we hope you guys get ready to enjoy a great weekend. Thanks for kicking it off with us here on our program here today. And we'll do our Gator Hater Updater. Of course, remind you that, listen, around here is what we believe. There is nothing better than a Georgia fan can do to express his or her fandom than being a Gator hater. We believe that it's just sort of good parenting to teach your kids to dislike those lousy, stinking Gators. And as Georgia looks for the foundation upon which to build success in 2020, the fact that it's beaten Florida now 3 years in a row, we think is an important part of that foundation. So here's the number for today, 1,140 days. That's how long it's been since Florida. That's how long it's been since the Gators have been able to have anything to celebrate against Georgia. That is good news, and it's a great way to start the weekend. Thanks for being with us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. I'll see you back here on Monday, and hope all of you enjoy your weekend. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We're going to try to run through and get a good number of comments here as fast as possible. A lot going on here today. I'm sure many of you have a weekend you're looking to get started there as well. So let us try to run through this, make the most of the time we have together. And, of course, we appreciate all of you being here this weekend. Let's pop over here on Facebook first. We'll get a few comments there. YouTube, I'll try to squeeze in some Twitters there too. Of course, R.S. Andrews makes it all possible. Really, any kind of air conditioning issue you might be dealing with, heating issue this time of year may be more prominent, a plumbing issue, an electrical issue, whatever that might be, R.S. Andrews is really, I think, the best source to get that stuff fixed, get those systems back to factory fresh specs. You can check them out online at rsandrews.com. Dari and the whole team over there will take great care of you. They deliver smiles, and they can deliver a smile for you too, but you've got to check them out online at rsandrews.com. Larry Haddock says, why are they not looking for another quarterback? Is that a sign that Fromm is coming back? So they are looking at another quarterback, Larry. It's important to note that Georgia's trying to make its pitch for C.J. Stroud. Now, this weekend, Georgia won't get to do that. They've hosted Stroud on a visit before. Stroud's visiting Ohio State this weekend. So that's the kid from Rancho Cucamonga, California. He is a guy that Georgia has been involved with. Georgia's obviously got Carson Beck coming in. They've made their pitch to Stroud, and Stroud's going to Ohio State this week. Now, he very well may sign with Ohio State, and that may be how that goes out. Now, as far as Fromm leaving to go to the NFL, I truly believe he has not made that decision yet. There's a chance that he does. There's a chance that he just sort of sees the situation and says, maybe a little bit like what some of the guys thought last year of, I may not be a first-round pick, but my overall draft grade may not change much from junior year to senior year. There's a possibility that's part of the thought process. There's also a chance it's not. I think the draft is very difficult to predict because what is thought to be common knowledge early in the process does not necessarily end up being common knowledge once the people closest to the organizations weigh in. So I think at this point in time, I think that Jake Fromm is probably in the midst of deliberating on all of this. You're going to hear a lot of rumors about him, a lot of people that know who, feel like they know whatever else. If I had to guess right now, I don't think Fromm knows. And so in terms of Georgia being involved with, like, say, a transfer quarterback or something like that, you probably won't hear too much about that unless it becomes a necessity. And at that point in time, if Fromm says, hey, I've made my decision, I'm going to the NFL, if that becomes the announcement, then you better believe, I certainly think that Georgia will then look to get quickly involved with transfer quarterbacks, look to get quickly involved with guys who have a chance to come in and be a more likely starter right away, because I don't believe that Georgia would leave its quarterback position in the hands of a bunch of guys who've really never played before. Bennett, let's say Stroud came in, Dwan Mathis is still here, Carson Beck would be here by then. That's a bunch of guys who've played very little in Bennett's case, or in the other guy's case, none at all. Georgia's not going to leave its quarterback room in that situation. So hearing Georgia more involved with transfer quarterbacks will only come up if that becomes a necessity. That's my belief anyway. Lottie Lauderdale says it feels like the end of this recruiting cycle is crazy, helter-skelter. And Lottie, I think that's probably true. And it's one of the reasons why I enjoy it. Sometimes you can hear me talk, and you can tell I just kind of talk fast. When I'm in my element, in my rhythm, I'm just kind of a fast-moving person. If you're ever around me, I have a lot of nervous energy. I'm tapping things. I'm, sort of airboxing, or, just whatever else. I'm just kind of always just kind of doing something, right? And so for someone like me who has a lot of sort of like frantic, spastic, nervous energy, the end of a recruiting cycle like this, I feel right at home, because I love how quickly the news comes in, and this Georgia coach is here, and that Georgia coach is there, and Georgia's offering this guy, and this guy's decommitting from this place, and everybody's trying to figure out how they can finish quickly and strongly, and I just think it's great. I love the news cycle here. The pace with which it moves is something in which I'm very comfortable with. Chuck Pearson says, Birch, Washington, Ringo, and Smith. Yeah, it's going to be a good finish. Obviously, the Smith there is Arian Smith. Mike Gagne says, does the Fromm ankle injury scare him into leaving early? I don't think the ankle injury was severe enough that, that changed his thought process. He's talking about the one that he had to get taped up in the SEC championship. Those sort of normal bumps and bruises are a part of the football process. I don't think anything about that happened to him in, last Saturday is all that unique. Bama Boy asking about how many scholarships Kirby has to offer. I guess the thought process here is, given the fact that Wolf and Cage are counted against the 2020 class, Georgia has about 23. They may not sign 23, but that's about what they could do. I think they can get up to 23, I believe. And Light Dog seems to think the same thing. So, yeah, somewhere around 22, 23. They may not do quite that many, but that's what they can do. Jonathan Snook says the Gator Hater sign needs to be bigger on that nice new desk. Is this the one that Eddie holds? Maybe so. The problem is if it's much bigger, Eddie can't hold it. He'll just sort of tip over. But maybe so. Eventually, and y'all don't care about this, I kind of want to do something in this space over here. I feel like we have a lot of space we don't really use. So, we'll try to figure that out at some point in time. We'll try to figure that out. I wonder if like a Gator Hater thing would look good here. I wonder. Maybe so. You never know what we might do. Let's see what else is going on YouTube. Real Rashad says, all my friends are telling me to become a Gator fan. Rel, if that be the case, they're not your real friends. Listen, you don't let your friends steer you down the wrong direction like that. The next thing you know, you're going to tell me they were telling you to smoke when you're a teenager. They're pushing you down the wrong path, Rel. You got to resist that temptation. DWB on YouTube says, feels like UGA's on the decline already. A lot of big-time recruits choosing other schools. Seems like they see the writing on the wall. At any given moment in time, there's all kinds of pieces of information, pieces of news out there. And the news that you choose to grab and take hold of is kind of what's going to form the narrative that exists in your mind. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. When you lose SEC championship game as badly as Georgia did, when your most popular assistant coach kind of leaves to even to become a head coach, your most popular assistant left, that kind of leaves a little bit of a distaste in the mouths of a lot of fans. And, there's only so much recruiting success you can enjoy to wash all of that away. I get that. I guess all I'm going to say is I'm not going to tell anybody not to pay attention to what has happened for the negative. Coaches you wish were still here, games you wish would have won, philosophical beliefs that you wish Kirby Smart would alter. I'm not going to tell you to ignore any of that kind of stuff. I'm going to just do my part to say, make sure you notice this, and make sure you notice that, make sure you notice this. Because, Georgia may not get every recruit that it wants, but there are probably at least 125 teams in college football that would be very jealous of the way that Georgia goes about its business and recruiting, and there may be all of them but a couple that would trade places with Georgia's class in a heartbeat. So, that's not my thing to carry the water for Georgia because that's not my job. I'm an independent dude, independent-minded even. But I think the full picture of what's going on is, life kind of has a tendency to, I'm going to be a philosophical blowhard for a second. Life has a tendency to run on parallel tracks. Good stuff and bad stuff happen at the same time. It's not, this was a good period and this was a bad period. No. If you really look back over the course of your life, and football programs run the same way, there's a good and bad going on at the same time. Georgia's got some bad going on, and parallel to that, they've got some good going on. So I think it's, the job to make sure you don't let your affinity for one side of that, the other, whether you're, sort of an optimist or a pessimist, detract from your ability to kind of see the bigger, overall, larger picture. So I apologize for being a philosophical blowhard there. Dog Life Ain't Easy says they got roads in Columbia. I believe what Kirby Smart said as he got on the Kirby copter, to quote Doc Brown from, is it the end of Back to the Future 1? Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. So I believe that may be Kirby Smart's line there. So they may only have dirt roads in Columbia, but when you got the Kirby copter, you don't necessarily need anything else. Richard Smith says we should move Eddie closer to the camera. So one of our buddies, John Benton, who comments on Facebook, it sort of talked about we may get Eddie a throne at some point in time. Maybe that'll make him just look bigger. The problem is, and you may not be surprised to hear this, finding thrones for stuffed animals is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. So we may eventually do that. James Wade says, how did Nix beat out Stingley for SEC Freshman of the Year? Honestly, I have no idea. I don't follow those things as much as you might think I should. Maybe I probably should follow them more. Do they only do one Freshman of the Year? If that be the case, then Stingley kind of got robbed, because the honest truth is Stingley's best defense back on that team. The absolute best defense back on that team. Better than Delpit, better than anybody else you want to mention. Joe Brummel says, need to flip Lloyd and Burton. The Burton thing I'm here for. At this point in time, it seems like the Marshawn Lloyd ship has sailed, especially now that Bobo's in the mix there now. Dog Life Ain't Easy says, this is starting to be a thing. Dog Life, I'm not sure what you're mentioning, but hopefully whatever it is a good thing. Chuck Pearson says, Stingley's legit. He really is. Very good player. Very good player. Santiago Diarn on the subject of Jake Fromm. So obviously Georgia's got to play better offensively. There's no doubt about that. Georgianne Olive says, how about this? Boy, we have such a sophisticated audience. Georgianne Olive says, I buy things for movies and TV. I can find a throne. Georgianne, that's great to hear. Boy, we have such a sophisticated audience. That's nice to know. Brandon says, I had no trouble finding Connor a throne. I don't know about that. So I was in my daughter's room. She's 4, so I was in her room the other day, and she's got all this like Barbie furniture and stuff, and Barbie dolls are fairly tall. And I was like looking at some of that, and she started looking at me funny because I was like examining her doll furniture so much. So I'm gonna have to try to do that again under the cover of darkness when she's not paying attention to me. All right, Morris Rich asked a really good question. Morris says, BA, did Kirby really try to get Bobo? If so, then I'm not happy with Bobo. I think this is a very interesting question. Let me see if I can kind of bring all of this to light. So there's a guy named Andy Staples who's kind of a respected national writer. He works for one of the pay sites. It's The Athletic. In a little blurb in a mailbag, he kind of matter-of-factly sort of spat it out that Kirby tried to hire Mike Bobo. And that really hasn't been reported. I think it's been speculated and wondered about, but it really hasn't been reported. And what it kind of reminds me of a bit is what happened with Eddie Gran a year ago, where I think, and if I had to guess, I would say it was Gran who tried to use this of saying, well, Georgia offered me the offensive coordinator job, and I turned it down because I want to stay here at Kentucky. And Kirby Smart or whomever, whoever says, well, no, that didn't happen. This is just a position coach. This is, not offered the chance to be an offensive coordinator, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And the Bobo thing feels very similar to that, except for this. It's easy to understand Eddie Gran saying, well, I'm going to use Georgia's overture to get more money for my employer. Doesn't it seem a little hard to see Mike Bobo doing that? Even if he doesn't care anything about like sticking it to Georgia in that regard, would he really want to stick it to Kirby Smart in that regard? So to see a story play out similar to the Eddie Gran thing a year ago, but knowing that the coach in question this time, Bobo, is so different than the coach in question that time, Eddie Gran, the whole thing about that seemed really weird to me. Now, listen, I got no reason to doubt the sourcing of Andy Staples on this. I think ultimately, though, a lot of this kind of stuff comes down to semantics. Coaches talk to each other a lot about a lot of things. What is the definition of a job offer? I think a lot of times there's kind of a sliding scale of what the definition is. But it certainly undermines Kirby's, I guess, stated belief that, hey, we're fine offensively. We trust the coaches that we have. We just got to get better with our execution on the field. That viewpoint is undermined if Kirby did go after Bobo and was unsuccessful in procuring him, especially given the fact that Bobo ultimately chose a different former Georgia player to play for, one who is thought to be solidly on the hot seat for next season. Now, Bobo's got a 2-year deal, but there's no chance that Will Muschamp lasts 2 years if things don't get better. So there's a risky proposition associated with choosing South Carolina. So I'm assuming you're a Georgia fan. I'm a Georgia fan. Here's what I'd say. I hope that's not true. I hope that Georgia didn't go after Bobo and not get him, and Bobo chose a job like South Carolina over Georgia. That wouldn't be a good look. That'd be pretty disturbing all the way around. So we may never know for sure. In fact, we likely won't ever know the full details of all of this, because even the people close to the Georgia program, if you ask them, they've got an ulterior motive for spinning their story a certain way. And I truly don't believe it's lying. I mean, there's a reason why eyewitness accounts are notoriously unreliable in certain kinds of trials, because people have a way of just sort of seeing things differently. So if you ask a Bobo camp, hey, did Georgia offer you a job? Maybe as the reporter for The Athletic determined, yeah, they would say yes. If you ask the Georgia camp, hey, did y'all offer Bobo a job? Maybe someone in the Georgia camp would say, no, that's not what happened. That's not the way that all went down. People have a way of just sort of seeing things differently. Two sides to every story. You've probably heard that before. So the long answer to all this is I'm not quite sure what happened there. But certainly if it was true at face value that Georgia tried to get Bobo and didn't get him, something about that to me would be a little bit weird. So there's that. Mike Wayne Folan says Bobo would be in place to replace Muschamp. You may be right, Wayne, but, it really doesn't seem like that happens very much, where if a head coach wears out his welcome, they promote from within with one of the offensive coordinators. I think Bobo's actually, and I think he's a really good coach, but just to be completely honest, I think he's actually a long way away from being a head coach again. I think he probably knows that. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be willing to take an offensive coordinator job. James Crump criticizing Bobo's evaluation of quarterback talent, and obviously the way in which Georgia did not recruit Deshaun Watson enough, and I think that's the way to say it. Georgia did recruit Watson, in on him too late, maybe not making him feel loved enough along the way. And that's probably a little bit of a collar that Bobo has to wear, and maybe Mark Richt there too. Tim Tatum also says it was more Richt than Bobo when it comes to the Watson thing. You may be right about that. So a couple more we're going to get ready to go because we've got to go. Lottie Lauderdale says Bobo got scapegoated big time at Georgia. The one thing that I'll say is I always thought it was really irritating that, Bobo was making about $500,000 at Georgia. I don't remember the exact numbers. It's kind of a long time ago now. But he was making like $500,000 at Georgia at a time in which Chad Morris was making like more than $1 million running the offense for Clemson. The numbers, the dollars for big-time offensive coordinators had gotten to be pretty significant, and Bobo was still, for the most part, at Georgia pretty well working on the cheap. It always drove me crazy, especially given the fact that when Bobo left, the next guy, inferior to Bobo in every single way, Brian Schottenheimer, came in, got the $950,000 salary. That's the money they should have been paying Bobo to begin with. I've always wondered. I realize guys want to be a head coach, but it's not like Colorado State was a destination job. Had Georgia been paying Bobo what he was worth to begin with, would he have ever left in the first place? So I've always kind of wondered that. So scapegoating him for various things. I've always felt like the media has overblown the criticism that Bobo received, just because I think that it's not unique, right? Every offensive coordinator has been ripped to shreds. Every other program since then. It's just, when your team loses, the first place everyone turns is to play calling. Every play that doesn't work, hindsight kicks in like that, and people look back on it and say, well, how could that play have ever been thought to work? There's just something really powerful about hindsight when offensive plays don't work. So the criticism that Bobo got from Georgia fans really isn't, to me, all that unique. Somebody mentioning holding animus towards a guy like Josh Braun. Here's my thing on this. I totally think that making decisions about where you want to go to school is a really difficult thing. And while I hate the entity that is Florida, I try not to hate any kind of person. I really try not to, right? I like having fun with rivalry stuff, and I'm really going to try to push to make Georgia football more fun this upcoming year, but I'm going to try not to do that at the expense of other people. I'm not going to, especially young, high school kids who are trying to make the best possible decision they can. So I think life is just sort of too short for the most part to get too angry about things like that. So that's kind of my thought on that. David Gross says, we need a code word for Schottenheimer so that his name doesn't have to be mentioned anymore. Do you know he's still coaching? I think he's still the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, and Seahawks are actually one of the better teams in the NFC. I don't think Schottenheimer's doing all that much better, but when you got Russell Wilson, that can certainly cover up for a multitude of sins. Kevin says you can add a scholarship for Beal leaving. I guess it depends on when he leaves in terms of when you get access to that scholarship and about when he's actually off of campus. But yeah. James Dyke says, do you think the development of receivers and tight ends drives our recruiting right now? I absolutely do. Absolutely. I think it's a little bit of a false premise for Georgia to say, hey, we just got to get some better receivers and the offense is going to be great. I think it's a false premise. The offense that you run will largely determine the quality of receivers you're able to recruit. Receivers want to play in an offense that's going to showcase them. Now, that doesn't mean that you should take a bunch of receivers who are not willing to block. You shouldn't do that. You got to have guys who are willing to be full and complete football players, and contributing as a blocker is an important part of that. I mean, Julio Jones for the Falcons played at Alabama. That's an example of that, of a guy that, going to be a great receiver, but also kind of play the game at the full, complete level. But that also means you can't just be blockers. You can't just be, contributors to the running game. You can't just be physical. You got to be, getting your chance to shine a bit too. And I don't think the Georgia offense has allowed receivers to shine as much as it could. So when that's the case, you're always going to have a little bit of a governor on your progress in terms of recruiting wide receivers. Deep down, Georgia has to know that's true. They need to find a way to develop the guys they have, put them in the NFL. More guys like McCole Hardman, leaving Georgia, succeeding in the NFL. If that be the case, then Georgia can start recruiting some of these receivers that right now they're not in the mix for. There's a whole class of receiver here for Georgia in 2020 that didn't give the Dogs really the time of day. That can change in the future, but Georgia's got to find a way to develop and really showcase the guys that it has. I think that's true. All right, we have got to go. Good comments today. Chris Johnson says, on that note, there's so many people clamoring for Hines Ward to join the staff. I've talked to Ward about being a coach before. I know he says he wants to do that. I talked to a guy the other day, and here's what he told me. He worked for an SEC school, and he wasn't, he's just kind of one of the up-and-coming type guys. And here is one of the things that he had to do as a part of his tasks. Daily tasks. Everybody's got a daily list of things you have to do for your job. Here was just one of his tasks. And I thought this was kind of amazing. He said that he was supposed to every day write 100 handwritten notes to various recruits. And the next day, he had to do 100 more. And the next day, 100 more, and 100 more, and 100 more, and 100 more. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the part behind the scene. And Hines Ward may very well want to do all of that. We have seen some players make that transition to coaching. But some of these guys who make like the millions and millions of dollars, sometimes they like the idea of the coaching on the front end, the public end, where you're at practice and you're working with guys and you're helping them get better. But the honest truth is, maybe the dirty secret is, at least 75%, if not more, of the daily tasks and duties for a wide receiver coach in a place like the SEC, about 3/4 of that, if not more, is recruiting. You are only an on-field coach about, and I'm obviously guessing at the percentages here, but I believe I'm about right on this. You're only an on-field coach for about 25% of your job. Other than that, you are recruiting. And a lot of guys, when they really get into that, they find out that part of the job is not nearly as much fun as I thought it was going to be. Now, that doesn't mean that Hines Ward would truly be that way, but if Ward really wanted to be a coach, he'd be doing some of that kind of stuff right now. So I guess even though Ward himself has said, yeah, I'd like to be a coach. I'd love to be coaching, wide receivers at my alma mater, a place like Georgia. I'd love to be doing that. The actual tasks of being a coach is honestly not that fun. And so sometimes I take it with a grain of salt, even when guys say they want to do it. Sometimes I think maybe they don't fully understand everything that's associated with the job, but certainly there's a process to follow if a guy like that wants to get a job like that. Winston Mock does remind us, by the way, Army-Navy tomorrow. That is a really fun game, a great rivalry. And, yeah, I think it's a cool thing to be able to see. I always like the uniforms they wear for that game, so Army-Navy tomorrow would be a lot of fun. Casey Cochran gives us an example of Terrence Edwards. Now, this is an example of a guy, and I'm not making a comparison between Edwards and Ward here because I think they're both, tremendous assets to the UGA community. But Edwards is a guy who's like not seeking the limelight as a coach, but like sort of just rolling up his sleeves and doing the work. he's on a field, I guess, just about every day. I mean, I can't think of a time that I've texted him, called him, done whatever, where he hasn't either been on his way to a field, coming from a field, on the field at that particular time. I mean, this is a guy that's sort of dedicated himself to the work. I mean, we got a lot of high school coaches that watch and listen to this show, especially this time of year. School kind of slowing down, football season's over for a lot of people. Well, these high school coaches will tell you that is a grind, man. That is tough, and you do it because you love it. You do it because maybe you feel called to it, but it is not one of these glamorous jobs most of the time. It feels great on Friday nights, but the other 12 months out of the year, it can be really, really taxing and takes time away from your family and everything else. Crystal Cromer says, who do you think would be the best offensive coordinator for Georgia taking us to the next level? So, Crystal, to be completely clear, if you'll pardon the pun, crystal clear for a moment, and I apologize for a really bad joke, I'm not completely done with Coley just yet. I've been critical of Coley, but I'm not completely done with him just yet. I'm not outwardly calling for him to be fired. I'm open to all suggestions, but I'm not calling for Coley to necessarily be fired. Would I like to have seen Georgia find a way to bring some new ideas into the program? I would. And it's not necessarily, I guess, a done deal. They won't find a way to do some of that. I think, unfortunately, Bobo would have been a really good choice. I think that Bobo is a really good offensive coordinator. I was thinking about this. His final year at Georgia was 2014, 6 seasons since then. Think about how many of those years. Certainly 15 comes to mind, the first year without him. Kirby's first year in 16, a little bit in 2019. Think about 3 of those 6 years at least have really left a lot to be desired for Georgia offensively. He's actually proven to be a really hard guy to replace. So if Georgia's going to be looking for any new ideas from any source, Bobo for me would have been a really good one. A really good one. Matt Rukavina mentioning Dan Mullen on the Cowboy short list. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. Sonia Prescott mentioning an interesting name in terms of offensive acumen. Philip Jordan Will on the subject of RPO. I'm no X's and O's guys. I don't ever pretend to be. But I always think it's really funny how often on social media the phrase RPO is misused. People have a tendency to think that what Lamar Jackson does is an RPO. He either throws it or he runs. But an RPO is not really a running quarterback. The run in an RPO is a running back. One of the touchdowns that LSU scored against Georgia was a classic RPO play where quarterback sticks it in a running back's belly, looks to see what the linebacker does, pulls it back out, and throws over top. That's the RPO thing. I always think it's really funny how often people confuse a read option with an RPO. And like I said, I'm not, Johnny Coach, but I always think that's really interesting. And I'm glad that Philip Jordan Wells brings that up. Baricus Mills on the subject of how many former players are coaching at South Carolina. Yeah, there are a lot of them for sure. A lot of them. It's really kind of amazing. Thomas Brown, Brian McClendon's still there. Obviously, Bobo, Muschamp. That is really a Georgia East these days, is it not? Let's see if there's anything else. I really got to go. Good comments today, though. Always really fun. Cliff Payne on the subject of Ole Miss's offense in comparison to Georgia's against LSU. That's certainly true. I also think where Ole Miss caught LSU made it a little easier. Obviously, LSU's not going to look past the SEC championship game, so that's an interesting comparison. Woody Tripp reminding us that Ward is now getting into coaching. He is with the Jets now, so that's a good point, Woody. That's a very fair point. Very fair point. I'd forgotten about that. Let's see if we can get one more here. I will also say that coaching the NFL is a lot different than coaching in college in terms of the task that's there. John Adams says he's fearful that Jermaine Burton, the ship may have sailed. I guess I did see this with Rakeem Jarrett, that apparently he had a tweet that goes out there about like, hey, businessman, got to make a business decision. Maybe Jarrett's thinking about looking around. If that be the case, then LSU may double down its pursuit of Jermaine Burton. That's a pretty good job of John Adams connecting some dots there. I hope that's not true. That's not a great way to close out the week, but John brings up a pretty good point on that. So we'll see where that goes. All right, we got to go. Good stuff. Sorry we can't take more comments, although we ended up taking a lot more than I was supposed to. So let me try to fly off the air here. Check out the AJC. Get your Atlanta news now from AJC.com. A great way to stay up to date and in touch on everything going on in your world. Atlanta news now at AJC.com, including all kinds of fun things to get ready for the holidays. State championships here this weekend. They're at Georgia State Stadium. Good previews of all those. Check those out. And then check in throughout the day to get Atlanta news now at AJC.com. Also, huge thanks to R.S. Andrews, making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. It's cold at night right now, y'all, and if your heat goes out, you're going to be shivering and shaking throughout the night. You don't want that to be the case. Get the $99 Furnace Mega Safety Check tune-up from our friends at R.S. Andrews. They'll make sure your system's in factory-fresh specs, and it's safe enough to make its way through the full winter to come. Find out more about that online at rsandrews.com. You have a great weekend. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. I'll see you back here again on Monday.